You have a gift for making everything uncomfortable. My mother's voice sliced through the dining room like the edge of a cracked wine glass, thin and sharp and right on the verge of shattering. She didn't look up as she said it. Her attention stayed on the stack of embossed invitations spread out on the polished mahogany table, her fingers moving with mechanical precision as she tied another blush-pink ribbon. I stood there holding a sweating glass of iced tea, my thumb tracing the condensation, watching one perfect ribbon after another slide into place like I was witnessing a factory line, not my family planning my sister's wedding. "Good afternoon to you too," I said softly. Nothing. Just the faint scratch of her pen as she double-checked a name on the guest list. "My name is Rowan, by the way. Rowan Ellis. I'm 28 years old and I design weddings for a living. Not just centerpieces and color palettes, but entire experiences. Mountaintop elopements at sunrise, cliffside ceremonies where the wind steals the bride's veil and everyone laughs, redwood forest dinners under strings of lights you can barely see because the stars are so bright. I live in Asheville, North Carolina, but I spend more time on the road than at home, chasing good light and wild locations for couples who want their weddings to feel like their real lives, not some staged production. I've planned over 100 ceremonies on 3 different continents. I've stood in the snow in Iceland with a couple who exchanged vows while the northern lights rippled overhead. I've watched 2 grooms kiss for the first time in front of their families in a mossy Oregon canyon, their mothers crying and gripping each other's hands. I've seen more honest, raw, ridiculous, beautiful love than most people get in a lifetime. But I won't be invited to my own sister's wedding. "Mom," I said, setting my tea down carefully on a coaster like that would somehow make what I was about to ask more polite. "Can we talk about what you just said?" She exhaled through her nose the way she did when the dog used to track mud into the house. Irritated. Put upon. Disappointed in some inevitable, predictable way. "What I just said," she replied, still laser-focused on the invitations, "is that you have a talent for making things awkward. Especially at sensitive events." "Sensitive events," I repeated. "You mean weddings?" Her lips twitched, not quite a smile, not quite a flinch. "Among other things." Sunlight filtered through the high windows of my parents' dining room in Columbus, Ohio, catching dust motes in the air. Everything in this house looked like it had been frozen in amber sometime around 2007. The same cream curtains, the same heavy wooden furniture, the same floral runner in the hallway that had muffled our teenage sneaking out like a co-conspirator. The only new thing in the room was the stack of invitations. June and Oliver. June is my little sister. 24. Petite, freckled, hair the color of wheat. June, who never raises her voice, who double-checks the rules, who still calls my mother to ask how long chicken can stay in the fridge before you have to throw it out. June, who got engaged last Christmas in front of the entire extended family, beside the fireplace, with champagne and a Tiffany box and my mother's happy tears soaking her mascara. June, who, according to that stack of cardstock and my mother's careful pen, is about to have the wedding my parents always imagined for a good daughter. "They're beautiful," I said, nodding toward the invitations. And I meant it. Soft decal edges, letterpress names, a watercolor illustration of the Charleston harbor where the ceremony would be. "They really are, Mom." He paused for a second, surprised. Then her posture relaxed by 0.5 millimeter. "Well, June and I spent a lot of time choosing them." "I can tell." I waited. I could feel the words stacking up in my throat, waiting for some opening. My therapist would have told me to pick a neutral statement, something that didn't sound like an accusation. "So," I tried, "what exactly do you mean when you say I make everything uncomfortable?" She finally looked up. My mother's eyes are a pale, icy blue that people always compliment. "They're so striking," friends say, "just like Rowan's." I sometimes wish mine weren't so similar, just so no one would see us side by side and think there was some deeper connection we didn't actually have. "Rowan," she said slowly, "you know how you can be." I almost laughed. Of course. The phrase. The one that had been trailing behind me like a shadow ever since middle school. "You know how you can be. Too loud. Too opinionated. Too emotional. Too queer. Too successful in the wrong kind of career. Too unwilling to tuck myself neatly into the box labeled nice Christian daughter that my parents had pre-assembled long before I was born." June fit perfectly in that box. I never did. "What does that mean exactly?" I asked, keeping my voice as level as I could. Because from where I'm standing it sounds like code for, we don't trust you to exist around other people without embarrassing us. Mom's jaw tightened. Don't be dramatic. I'm not being dramatic. I'm literally just asking. She picked up another ribbon, smoothed it between her fingers. Rowan, this is June's moment. She and Oliver have been working so hard to plan something classic, elegant, respectful. We don't want anything to detract from that. There was. Not said outright but implied so heavily it might as well have been printed on the invitations in gold foil. You are a distraction. You think I'd show up to my own sister's wedding and, what? Wear a white gown and juggle fire. A ghost of a smile flickered across her face. Because yes, I had once juggled fire at a New Year's Eve festival in Asheville, but it vanished just as fast. You know perfectly well what I mean, she said. You bring energy, opinions, and people talk, Rowan. She lowered her voice like we were being recorded. You and your lifestyle, your Instagram, your arrangements. By arrangements, she meant my relationship. I thought of Noah for a moment, his easy grin and the way he tilted his head when he looked at me like he was really seeing me. Noah, who shot landscape photography and made coffee the exact way I liked it and had spent the last 2 years willingly waking up at ungodly hours to hike up mountains with me and my couples. We'd been together for almost 3 years. My family had met him exactly once at Thanksgiving and treated him like an Uber Eats driver who'd accidentally sat down at the table. What exactly do you think I'm going to do? I asked. Kiss my boyfriend in public? Have my tattooed arms out? Exist? See, she said with a triumphant little puff of air. This attitude. This is what I mean. It's always about making a statement with you. About pushing boundaries. I took a slow breath. Counted to 3. Thought about lighting in golden hour, the way everything looks softer but somehow more honest. Do you know what I do for a living? I asked. Yes, you plan unconventional weddings, she said, the word unconventional curled like it had a bad taste. I design experiences, I corrected gently. I create spaces where people feel safe being exactly who they are, where families actually talk to each other, where nobody has to pretend. I'm literally paid to make sure people are comfortable. You're paid, she said, to indulge people's whims. I let that slide past me. So, I said, finally putting it out there, when is June sending the invitations out? Mom's gaze flickered just for a moment. They're going out this week. When were you planning to tell me I'm not getting one? My voice didn't crack on that sentence. I'm still a little proud of that. She sat up straighter, folding her hands on top of the RSVP list. Rowan, don't make this harder than it needs to be. I'm just asking a yes or no question. Am I invited? She looked at me for a long time like she was searching my face for some version of me she could manage. Some version that was softer, quieter, easier. Some version that didn't exist. The guest list is very tight, she said finally. The venue has strict limits. June and Oliver really wanted to include some people from his firm. And their church group. And the college friends. People have expectations. So the answer is no, I said. Her lips pressed into a thin line. We just don't want any tension. You know how your presence can change the atmosphere. By existing. I'm not going to argue with you about this, she snapped, a flash of real irritation breaking through the practiced politeness. June deserves a day that's about her and her future. Not about rehashing old conflicts. Conflicts. That was one way to describe the years of not-so-subtle comments about my haircut, my clothes, my tattoos, the fact that my first serious relationship had been with a woman, the way my father had cleared his throat and changed the subject every time I mentioned a new project or a new city I'd traveled to, the time my mother asked me over Christmas cookies whether I ever thought about how hard it is for us to have to explain me to her church friends. Did June ask you to tell me not to come? I said quietly. A tiny pause. Barely a heartbeat. But I felt it. This was a family decision, Mom replied. For the sake of peace. Peace. Right. The kind of peace where one person is silently suffocating so everyone else can say how calm the room feels. I looked down at the invitations again. At the watercolor of Charleston's harbor, the delicate little church spire silhouetted against a sky of cotton candy pink. When is it? I asked. I already knew the date. I'd seen it on June's ring pic caption months ago, but I wanted to hear my mother say it. October 9th, she said. Her voice softened instantly like someone had turned a dimmer switch. A Saturday at 4. The light will be beautiful for photos. There's a live oak near the water where they'll do the first look. The light, I repeated almost to myself. October light is a very specific kind of magic. Clear and low and forgiving. Yeah. It will. My phone buzzed in my back pocket. I could feel it against the denim of my jeans, insistent like it knew I needed an exit. Is that Noah? Mom asked, her mouth pulling tight around his name. Probably, I said. We're scouting locations this week for a couple from Denver. They want something dramatic for their vows. Dramatic, she said neatly, like she was filing the word away under things Rowan prefers to be. I pulled out my phone. It wasn't Noah, actually. It was my assistant, Serena. A preview popped up on the screen. Found it. The spot. Big Sur in October. You're going to scream when you see these photos. Something low in my chest hummed like a string being plucked. Big Sur. It sounds like you're very busy, Mom said. Which is another reason we thought it might be a relief for you, honestly. You won't have to rearrange your schedule or worry about what to wear, or how to behave in front of your grandparents. How to behave, I said. Right. I took my time finishing my tea. The ice had mostly melted. The glass left a damp ring on the coaster and I wiped it with my thumb because God forbid I leave a mark on the furniture. Does Dad know? I asked. We've discussed it, she said. Which meant he'd probably nodded and said, whatever keeps the peace, Laura, and gone back to his spreadsheet or his golf schedule. My father was an accountant by trade and a peacekeeper by habit. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't slam doors. He just stepped back like that was the same thing as neutrality. I set the empty glass down and straightened. Hey, I said. Mom blinked. Okay. Yeah, I said. Hey. June gets her peaceful, classic, elegant day. No tattoos in the background. No bisexual sister accidentally existing in the family photos. No awkward conversations about what I do for a living. You don't have to worry about me making anyone uncomfortable. I watched her shoulders drop with visible relief. I knew you'd understand, she said. This is really the most gracious thing you could do for your sister. Sure, I said. Gracious. She smiled. A real one, small and pleased, the kind she'd wear at church potlucks when people complimented her potato salad. We'll of course find a way to celebrate with you separately, she added. Maybe a brunch. Just us. After things settle down. Of course, I echoed. She picked up her pen again, sliding smoothly back into the task at hand. Thank you, Rowan. Truly. Sometimes I worry you don't see how your choices affect other people. But this shows a lot of maturity. I could feel something inside me shifting, like furniture being quietly rearranged in the dark. I should get going, I said. I have a flight back to Asheville tonight. Already, she fussed. You just got here. I came for the cake tasting, I reminded her. Which I wasn't invited to sit in on. That's because it was for the wedding party, she said. And you're not in it, I finished for her. Right. She hesitated like she wanted to protest, to call me sensitive, but the truth sat too plainly between us. Travel safe, she said instead. No, we say hello. She didn't say his name like a curse exactly. More like a stain she couldn't get out of a white blouse. I will, I lied. I walked through the hallway, past the high school graduation photos on the wall. June in her white dress, honor cords draped around her neck, our parents' arms around her shoulders. And me a year earlier in the same hallway, same dress, same cap. That photo had been taken before I'd cut my hair short, before I'd gotten my first tattoo, before I'd kissed a girl under the bleachers behind the football field and realized there was no way I was going to be able to live the bland, narrow life my parents envisioned for me. Both sets of eyes, 17-year-old me and 18-year-old June, followed me as I walked. At the front door I paused and looked back, waiting for some wave of grief to crash over me. For the weight of what I was losing to knock the air out of my lungs. Instead, what I felt was space. Not empty exactly. Just open. October 9th, I thought, stepping out into the damp Ohio air. A Saturday. 4 p.m. Golden light on the harbor in South Carolina. White folding chairs. A live oak tree. 100 carefully chosen guests. And no seat for me. My phone buzzed again. Serena, this time for real. I swiped the notification open. Sent you the gallery. Check your email. If there was ever a place that felt like you, it's this chunk of coastline. Imagine vows here at sunset. I stopped at the edge of the driveway, the asphalt warm under my sandals, and tilted my head back to look at the sky. It was that flat Midwest blue, the kind that never quite looks real. I pictured the Pacific instead. Cliffs falling straight into water the color of deep glass. Wind tugging at my hair. My shoulders bare, tattoos unapologetically visible. Noah's hand in mine. Golden light wrapping itself around us like a promise. My mother's voice echoed in my mind. You have a gift for making everything uncomfortable. For the first time, instead of feeling like a curse, it sounded like a possibility. Maybe I did make people uncomfortable. Maybe some rooms deserved that. I opened my email right there in the driveway. Serena had attached a link to a gallery. I tapped it and a thumbnail popped up on my screen. A narrow strip of highway hugging the edge of a cliff, the ocean exploding in white foam beneath it, the sky on fire with sunset. The caption below the first photo read, Big Sur, October. Imagine the stories we could tell here. I stared at it for a long moment, the hum in my chest rising, spreading, turning into something that felt suspiciously like a plan. Okay, I whispered to no one. If I'm not invited to their story. I zoomed in on the image until the pixels blurred, until all I could see was light and color and infinite horizon. Then I'll make my own. I flew back to Asheville that same evening, watching the grid of Ohio dissolve into blackness beneath the plain. By the time the Smoky Mountains appeared below in their soft blue shapes, I felt like I'd traveled much farther than a couple of states. Something had shifted, quietly but irrevocably. My apartment sits on the third floor of a converted textile mill, all brick walls and tall, arched windows that turn every sunrise into an art installation. When I walked in, the last of the golden light was drifting across the floorboards, hitting my plants just right so they looked like they were glowing. Noah was sitting on the couch editing photos on his laptop, a blanket pulled over his legs like he'd been there for hours. When he heard the door, he glanced up and smiled, that easy, lopsided smile that still caught me off guard sometimes. Hey Ro, he said. How was Ohio? I dropped my bag, kicked off my shoes and fell onto the couch beside him. The blanket was warm. He smelled like cedar and coffee, familiar and grounding. Exhausting, I said. June's stuff, he asked gently. Mom's stuff, I corrected. Which is basically the same thing. He closed his laptop without me asking and pulled me closer, resting his chin on top of my head. I felt his heartbeat against my back, steady, patient, asking nothing of me except honesty. So, he murmured, what happened? For a moment I didn't speak. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because the words were sharp and I needed to place them carefully. They're not inviting me, I said. To the wedding. Noah didn't move. Not a flinch. Not a gasp. No dramatic reaction. Just that small, deep inhale he did when he was absorbing something fully. Okay, he said softly. I pulled back enough to see his face. His eyes, hazel with flecks of gold, searched mine not with pity but with recognition. He knew my family. He knew what their approval cost. You're not surprised, I said. I'm angry for you, he corrected. But no. I'm not surprised. I let out a laugh, short and bitter. They said I make things uncomfortable. That my presence is too much. That I'd ruin the atmosphere. Your presence improves every atmosphere, Noah said instantly. That's the whole problem. I blinked. How is that a problem? For people who hate reflections, he said, brushing a piece of hair behind my ear, mirrors are a threat. I looked at him and for a moment the air seemed to still around us. He always did that, took the heavy, ugly truth and rephrased it into something I could hold without hurting myself. You want tea? He asked, standing and stretching. You look like someone who needs ginger. I need whiskey, I muttered. He stopped mid-step, raised an eyebrow and then changed direction toward the bar cart. I laughed for real this time. While he poured 2 drinks, I opened Serena's gallery on my phone again. The photos of Big Sur were even more staggering now that I wasn't standing in my parents' driveway. Cliffs. Light. Wildness. Freedom you could breathe. Noah handed me a glass and sat back down. What's that? Big Sur, I said. Serena sent me a gallery. A couple wants an October elopement. She thinks it's perfect. He sipped his drink, eyes narrowing thoughtfully. October, huh? Isn't that when? June's wedding, I finished. Yeah. Same month. He didn't comment. He didn't have to. I stared at the photos again, scrolling slowly, letting the colors seep into me. There was one shot, a narrow cove framed by massive cliffs, the water churning below like restless silver. The caption Serena added beneath it was simple. Imagine your own ceremony here. My breath hitched. No one noticed. Ro. I didn't answer right away. My mind was flickering between two worlds. The Charleston Harbor watercolor on June's wedding invitations, and this untamed coastline that looked like it refused to apologize for its own existence. What are you thinking? Noah asked softly. I'm thinking, I said carefully, that for the first time in my life my family made a decision for me that I don't feel obligated to fix. Noah tilted his head. Go on. They closed a door, I said. And instead of pounding on it, I feel like turning around and walking in the opposite direction. His eyes warmed, recognizing the shift even before I did. And that direction is? I swallowed, my heart suddenly pounding. Maybe here, I whispered, turning the screen toward him. Noah stared at the photo for a long moment. And then he said very quietly, Rowan, are you thinking what I think you're thinking? I took a deep breath. I'm thinking, I said, that if I'm not invited to their idea of a perfect wedding, nothing is stopping me from creating my own. He stared at me like he was absorbing every word. You mean our own, he said. The room stilled. Outside the window, the last edge of sunlight disappeared behind the mountains. Yes, I said breathless. Our own. Noah didn't smile, not at first. His eyes softened in that way that made me feel like I was being seen at the level of my bones. Then he reached out, cupped my jaw and kissed me, slowly, gently, with a kind of certainty that made my chest ache. When he pulled back, he whispered, Then let's not waste a single second on people who don't see your worth. We sat there in silence, the kind of silence that feels like a door opening. October 9th, I said. 4 p.m. Their ceremony. And ours, he asked. I looked down at my phone. At the cliffs. At the horizon. At the wildness calling to me like something I'd always known but never named. October 9th, I said. Sunset. Big Sur. Noah let out a slow breath. I'm in, he said simply. I didn't cry. I thought I would, but instead something warm spread through me, steady and bright. A quiet kind of power. For the first time since I was a teenager, my future didn't feel tied to my family's approval. It felt like mine. Completely mine. And as I stared at that photo again, at that fierce, impossible coastline, one truth crystallized in my mind. If they didn't want me in their story, I would write a better one. When I tell people I grew up in Ohio, they usually picture cornfields and polite Midwestern families who drink lemonade on porches and talk about the weather. And sure, my childhood looked like that from the outside. Clean house, ironed clothes, church every Sunday, a dad who fixed things before they broke, and a mom who ran the neighborhood book club like a sea. It took me years to realize that looking perfect was the most important religion my family practiced. I was 12 the first time I understood there was a right way to be a daughter in our house. I'd come downstairs wearing a dress I liked, black with a pattern of tiny white moons. It wasn't revealing or edgy. It was just me. Mom took one look and said, Sweetheart, let's save that for Halloween. Translation, hide the parts of yourself that don't fit. By high school the phrase evolved. You know how you can be, Rowan? Said when I laughed too loudly. When I cut my hair short. When I won a statewide art award and Mom insisted we downplay it so June wouldn't feel insecure. When I came out as bisexual at 17 and she told me not to tell my grandparents because, it's not that she was ashamed, it's just that they're old and wouldn't understand. That was the year I started keeping secrets. Not because I liked secrecy but because the truth never landed softly in my childhood home. Dad was gentler. Softer around the edges. But he existed in a perpetual state of conflict avoidance. The kind that looks like calm until you realize it's just absence. He loved us, I know he did, but in a way that never risked disturbing the air in the room. And then there was June. My opposite. My mirror image flipped inside out. If I was a storm, she was a still pond. If I questioned rules, she followed them to the letter. If I wanted to climb out of the box, she made the box look like the safest place in the world. She wasn't cruel. She just fit perfectly. And I never did. I think she learned early that her place in the family depended on staying small, agreeable, predictable. So she did. She became the daughter who asked permission instead of forgiveness. The daughter who never dyed her hair, who joined the clubs mom suggested, who majored in early childhood education because it sounded wholesome. Meanwhile, I, a walking contradiction of ambition and rebellion, became the daughter who needed monitoring, explanation, restriction. By the time we reached adulthood, it wasn't even spoken aloud anymore. June, the easy one. Rowan, the variable. Even my career was a problem. When I became a wedding designer, mom made a point of telling people I did events, as if admitting what I actually did, creating cinematic, non-traditional ceremonies, would reflect poorly on the family. When I traveled to Morocco for a desert elopement, she told people I was helping out at a friend's photo shoot. It was always like that. Always reframing. Always shrinking. Always managing me like a PR crisis. But the moment that perfectly encapsulated our dynamic happened when I was 22. I just shot a wedding in Lake Tahoe and gotten invited to contribute a design concept to a well-known bridal magazine. It was the biggest opportunity of my career at that point. I was buzzing, practically vibrating, with excitement. I drove straight to my parents' house to tell them. Mom listened with a tight smile, nodding at the correct moments. And then when I finished, she said, "Well, just don't bring this up too much around June. She just started her teaching job and it might make her feel behind." Behind. Like my accomplishments were headlights she needed shielding from. Dad said nothing. Just patted my shoulder and told me he was proud in his own way, whatever that meant. Later that night, I overheard Mom on the phone with her friend Carol. "Yes, Rowan is doing that creative thing. But, I don't think it's very stable. June just got hired at the elementary school. We're thrilled." It was the first time I realized I could set myself on fire in front of them and they'd comment on the smoke, not the heat. June and I drifted after that. Not because she didn't love me. I think she did in her own quiet, trapped way. But she'd become the emotional buffer between me and our parents. And that meant absorbing their anxieties, their expectations, their fears dressed up as tradition. She became their peace. And I became the threat to that peace. Which is why being excluded from her wedding wasn't a single blow. It was a culmination. The logical endpoint of 28 years of subtle pushes toward the edge. And yet, sitting on that couch in Asheville, Noah's solid presence anchoring me, the Big Sur gallery glowing on my phone, I felt something new. A kind of clarity I'd never allowed myself to have. My family hadn't rejected me on accident. They'd been rehearsing it my whole life. And for the first time the thought didn't break me. Instead, it felt like confirmation that the bridge had been burning behind me for years. And maybe it was time to stop looking back at the smoke and start walking toward somewhere I actually wanted to be. Somewhere with cliffs and ocean and wind that didn't care about who I kissed or how loud I laughed or what parts of myself refused to fit inside someone else's story. Somewhere I could breathe without apology. And if that place happened to be Big Sur at sunset on October 9th, then maybe, just maybe, my family had finally given me the push I needed to walk straight into my own life. 2 days after I got back to Asheville, the wedding industry machine kicked into full swing around me. My calendar filled itself like it always did this time of year. Venue walkthroughs, tasting meetings, lighting tests, floral mock-ups. Autumn is peak season for weddings and October is the crown jewel. Most designers dread it. I thrive in it. Chaos makes sense to me. Love and motion make sense to me. Family politics? Not so much. On Thursday morning, I was driving through the Blue Ridge Parkway with my assistant, Serena, scouting a mountaintop for a sunrise ceremony, when she glanced at me sideways and said, "Hey, spill." I pretended not to know what she meant. Spill what? She gave me a look over her sunglasses. "Your energy today is feral. In a good way, but still. Something happened." I sighed and leaned back in the passenger seat. The mountains blurred past, soft, rolling shapes dusted with early hints of gold. "My family isn't inviting me to June's wedding," I said. The words sounded lighter now, like I'd chewed the bitterness down to something manageable. Serena's jaw dropped. "I'm sorry, what? They're actually not inviting you? Like officially?" "Officially," I said. "No seat. No invitation. No awkward family photos where I ruin the vibe." She slammed her hand against the steering wheel. "The vibe. You are the vibe. They're out of their minds." I couldn't help laughing. Serena had the righteous fury of a best friend even though she technically worked for me. She believed in me in a way my own parents never quite managed. What did they say? She demanded. That I make things awkward. That June and Oliver want a classic atmosphere. That I bring energy. Energy. He spat the word like it tasted sour. Oh right. God forbid a wedding has personality. I shrugged. It's not like I fit their version of family-friendly aesthetics. Serena went quiet for a moment, her eyes narrowing as she took a turn toward the overlook. So, how are you? She asked, softer this time. Honestly. I exhaled. Weirdly okay. She turned off the engine but kept her gaze on me. That's not the answer I expected. Weirdly okay, I repeated. Because I think I'm done trying to make them comfortable. A breeze swept in through the open windows, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. Serena studied me the way she studied floral arrangements, carefully, analytically, waiting for the moment the shape revealed itself. Then she nodded. Good. God, Rowan. Good. He jumped out of the car, hiked up to the overlook, and I followed. The valley stretched below us, layers upon layers of blue and green with soft clouds nestled in the crevices like cotton. It was one of my favorite places to bring couples. Quiet, vast, like the world paused just long enough for them to speak their vows into it. Serena swept her hand toward the horizon. Okay, she said. Tell me what you're planning. Because you're planning something. I can see it. I bit my lip to keep from smiling too soon. What makes you think that? Because, she said, pointing a finger at me, that look in your eyes? That's your, I have an idea that would scandalize half the Midwest look. I laughed. It's not scandalous. She crossed her arms. Rowan Ellis, I swear on every eucalyptus branch in this forest. Tell me. I pulled out my phone. Opened the Big Sur gallery. Chose one of the photos. The cliffs in full golden hour glow, the sky turning molten behind them. Her reaction was instant. Oh my God, she whispered. Are you? We're talking about it, I said cautiously. Nothing's official yet. Rowan. She placed both hands on my shoulders. Please tell me you're considering getting married on the same day as your sister. I winced. Okay, that sounds petty when you say it like that. It sounds iconic when I say it like that, she corrected. It sounds like the universe correcting a mistake. I stared out over the valley, letting the wind whip my hair across my face. It's not about them, I said quietly. It's about wanting something that's ours. Something that isn't controlled by anyone else. Serena softened. Then it's perfect. I didn't tell her the part that had been burning in my chest since Ohio. That Big Sur didn't feel like revenge. It felt like freedom. It felt like reclaiming something my family kept trying to shrink. It felt like stepping out of one story and writing a completely new one. But the universe, for all its poetry, has a real talent for dramatic timing. Because later that evening, while Serena and I were back at the studio designing a minimalist floral arch for an Atlanta client, my phone buzzed with a notification from June. It wasn't a text. It wasn't a call. It was a post. Instagram. A picture of June and Oliver holding hands in front of the Charleston venue's oak tree, sunlight streaming between their fingers like some kind of divine spotlight. Caption read, "Can't wait to say I do under this tree in just a few short months. Surrounded by the people who matter most." I stared at the words until they blurred. The people who matter most. It wasn't a direct hit. It wasn't even aimed at me. But it landed with surgical precision. Before I could spiral, my phone buzzed again. Another notification. This time, from Noah. He'd posted a photo too. A candid shot I didn't even know he'd taken of me, sitting on a rock ledge during a sunrise shoot, legs dangling over the edge, the sky behind me exploding in pink and orange. My hair was wind-tangled. My face was lit up with something fierce. His caption. Found my future somewhere between the mountains, and her smile. October can't come soon enough. My breath caught in my throat. He didn't tag a location. He didn't say wedding. He didn't say Big Sur. But it felt like a breadcrumb. A promise. A declaration. Serena froze mid-flower stem as she read over my shoulder. Well, she said. Looks like Noah's all in. I didn't reply. Couldn't. My chest suddenly felt too full. Too warm. Too alive. Then she narrowed her eyes. Rowan, do you realize what this means? What? I whispered. It means the universe isn't being subtle anymore. And as the evening light poured through our studio windows, catching dust motes in shimmering suspension, I knew she was right. Something had shifted. The story was already turning. The question wasn't if anymore. It was when. And how big. I didn't sleep much after that night. Not because I was anxious, though there were nerves humming beneath my skin like power lines, but because something had clicked into place inside me. A decision so quiet yet so certain it felt like a stone settling at the bottom of a lake. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the tall mill windows of my apartment, striping the hardwood floor in long golden bands. I sat cross-legged on the couch with my laptop balanced on my knees, the Big Sur photos open in one tab, my calendar in another, and a blank document titled, October 9th, blinking expectantly at the top of the screen. Noah padded out of the bedroom half awake, hair tousled, wearing a soft gray t-shirt he'd worn thin with time. He rubbed his eyes, saw me sitting fully upright with intention radiating from every molecule, and blinked himself fully awake. Okay, he said, voice deep and sleepy. That's either your I had a great idea face or your I just accidentally booked 3 weddings in the same week face. I turned the laptop toward him so he could see the glowing cliffs of Big Sur. It's the first one, I said. He walked over, leaned his hands on the back of the couch behind me and looked at the screen. The morning sun lit the edges of his face, and something in his expression softened, like he was seeing the future form in real time. You're sure? He asked quietly. I took a breath. Yes, I said. I'm sure. Noah didn't smile immediately. He lowered himself onto the couch beside me, pulling one leg up and turning his whole body toward me. He studied my face, searching for hesitation, for doubt, for cracks. What changed? He asked. I closed the laptop halfway, letting the silence hang for a moment like a curtain. I realized something, I said. Something I've been avoiding for a long time. He nodded for me to continue. My family doesn't love me, I said. They love a version of me they wish existed. A quieter me. A simpler me. A me who wouldn't make them examine the choices they made about their own lives. Noah's gaze softened. And, I continued, I've spent almost 3 decades trying to deserve a place in their world. Trying to earn what should have been unconditional. I swallowed. And I'm done. He reached for my hand, threading our fingers together. I want something that's ours, I said. Something no one can shrink or edit or sanitize. I don't want to look back on my life and see all the ways I made myself smaller to fit someone else's comfort zone. Noah's thumb brushed across the back of my hand. And, I added, I want to marry you. Not someday. Not when things settle. Not after my family decides whether my existence is palatable enough for them. He went very still. You want to marry me in Big Sur, he said. It wasn't a question. It was a realization blooming in his chest. Yes, I whispered. I want to marry you in Big Sur. On October 9th. At sunset. With the ocean so loud it drowns out every voice that ever told me I wasn't enough. For a long heartbeat, Noah said nothing. His eyes were shining in the morning light. Soft, warm, overflowing. Then he exhaled, smiled slowly and said, Rowan Ellis. I've been waiting for you to say that. I didn't cry, but only because my body felt too full of something bright to make room for tears. So, he said, squeezing my hand, what's the plan? I opened the laptop again and tapped the blank document. This, I said, is step 1. He laughed. A Google Doc is step 1? It's symbolic, I said. The universe likes when you commit in writing. We spent the next hour sketching out the beginnings of our ceremony. Nothing fancy, nothing overproduced. We talked about locations along the coast, the time of sunset, the kind of rings we liked, the way we wanted it to feel. We didn't talk about family. Not yet. Around noon I got a text from Serena. Call me when you're free. I had a thought. It's chaotic. You'll love it. I called immediately. She answered on the first ring, breathless. Okay, hear me out. No greeting. No preamble. Pure Serena. Big Sur is already perfect, she said. But what if, just what if, we elevated it? I pinched the bridge of my nose. Define elevate. Minimalist florals, she said. Not too much, just touches of texture. Dried fan palms, bleached ruscus, maybe a few soft blush roses for romance. A crescent-shaped altar on the cliff, nothing over-designed. No arch, I said immediately. I don't want anything that feels like a set piece. Yes. Serena squealed. Exactly. Let the landscape do the work. Then she lowered her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. And what if we hired someone to film it? I blinked. Film it? For you, she said. Not for the internet. Not for clients. For you and Noah. Something raw and beautiful. The two of you against that ocean. Not staged. Not performative. Just intimate. My chest tightened. I love that, I said quietly. Good, she said. Because I already texted my friend Miguel. He's in LA and he's available that weekend. Don't argue. The universe is spoon-feeding you this wedding. I laughed. Serena. No, she said firmly. You deserve something extraordinary, Rowan. Something worthy of the way you love. After we hung up, I sat very still on the couch, my laptop warm on my legs, Noah in the kitchen making us coffee, the Big Sur cliffs glowing on my screen like a portal. This wasn't a fantasy anymore. It wasn't a rebellion. It wasn't even a reaction. It was a choice. A quiet, deliberate, radical choice. And I could feel the shift deep inside me, the tectonic plates of my life repositioning themselves. A new foundation forming. That afternoon I opened Instagram out of habit and found a new post from June. A picture of the wedding invitations laid neatly on a table. The same ones I'd watched my mother tie ribbon around. Caption. So grateful for everyone who will be there with us. Feeling so loved. The words pricked, but only briefly. Because for the first time I didn't feel excluded. I felt redirected. As if someone had gently taken my chin, turned my face away from a closed door, and pointed me toward the horizon I'd been afraid to claim. That night, as Noah and I lay in bed talking softly about ring designs and road trips and what our ceremony might sound like, a thought drifted into my mind. A realization. My family had spent years asking me to shrink. But Noah? Noah had only ever asked me to be more. And maybe choosing him on October 9th on those cliffs at sunset was the truest thing I could ever do. By the time September arrived, Asheville smelled like wood smoke and early apples, and my life had quietly begun rearranging itself around the possibility of October 9th. Not in a dramatic wedding planner during peak season way, more like tectonic plates shifting beneath the surface, slow and certain. Every day between meetings and mock-ups and sunrise shoots, I found myself returning to those Big Sur photos, letting them pull me forward like a tide. And every time I looked, the same thought whispered through me. This could be ours. I didn't tell many people yet. Not clients, not acquaintances, not even my dad when he called to discuss something mundane like the HVAC needing a tune-up. He didn't mention June's wedding. I didn't mention being uninvited. We performed our usual ritual of polite distance, both pretending the silence wasn't carrying the weight of something heavier. Only 3 people knew about the plan at this point. Noah, Serena, and me. Serena had started a secret Pinterest board titled Project Horizon, which she shared with me and Noah. It was full of cliffs, lanterns, wildflowers, stormy seas, windswept dresses, and a few chaotic memes she added for morale. Noah, for his part, had switched into a version of himself I'd only seen a handful of times. Focused, decisive, quietly electric. While I dreamt out loud, he handled the logistics. He contacted a friend of his named Mateo, a filmmaker he'd known for years who had a way of capturing people like he was listening to their souls. Mateo agreed to fly to California to document whatever we were planning. He also reached out to a local florist, someone whose work he'd admired online but had never met. Her name was Delphine, and her Instagram was a fever dream of coastal botanicals and textures I couldn't identify but instantly loved. She replied within an hour. Would love to create something raw and intentional for you. Big Sur is a character in itself. I know how to let it speak. I'd stared at that message for a long time. Raw and intentional. 2 words my family had never used about me. 2 words that felt like an invitation. And then there was the matter of the officiant. I found him by accident. An older man named Hale who lived in Monterey and officiated small elopements along the coast. His website had a single quote that stopped me cold. Love is the only ceremony life requires. Everything else is choreography. I emailed him that night. He wrote back the next morning. October 9th at sunset? I'm yours. Everything was falling into place with eerie ease, the kind that felt less like planning and more like fate. But the biggest preparation wasn't logistical. It was emotional. Because if we were really doing this, if Noah and I were actually going to stand on a cliff in one of the most beautiful places in the country and make vows with nothing but the ocean and a handful of chosen people as witnesses, I needed to be ready. Ready for the calls. Ready for the fallout. Ready for the seismic shift in the story of my life. But those calls hadn't come yet. Not from Mom. Not from Dad. Not from June. The silence was strange, like the whole family had collectively decided to ignore the shifting ground. We were all walking on a fault line and pretending not to hear the rumble. Part of me hoped, foolishly maybe, that June would reach out. That she'd see one of Noah's posts and ask gently whether I was okay. That she'd say she missed me. That she still wanted me in her life even if not at her wedding. But the only notifications I got from her were Instagram stories of cake tastings, dress fittings, monogrammed napkins and captions like, "Can't wait to celebrate with everyone we love. Everyone we love. Everyone except me." One night, after a 14-hour workday designing a mountain lodge ceremony, I collapsed onto the couch and opened the apartment windows. The air was cool and smelled like rain-soaked stone. Noah joined me, dropping onto the cushions with a soft groan. "You're thinking hard," he said. "I am. About the wedding or the other wedding?" I let out a breath. "Both. I don't want ours to be a reaction to theirs." "It isn't," he said without hesitation. "You're sure?" "Absolutely. Look at me." I did. His expression was steady, grounded. "We're doing this because we want to build something together. Because we want a moment that's ours. Because we want beauty and honesty and freedom. Not because of what your mom said. Not because of what she didn't say." I nodded slowly. Then he said something that landed deeper than he probably knew. "Rowan, your life stopped belonging to them the moment it started belonging to you." I didn't speak. Couldn't. Just leaned into him, letting his warmth seep into the places inside me that still felt bruised. After a long silence, he whispered, "Tell me what you see when you imagine it." I closed my eyes. And the vision came instantly. Wild and vivid. "I see a cliff," I said. "Windy. The kind of wind that feels like it's trying to lift you off the earth. And I see rocks. Massive ones. And a horizon so wide it hurts to look at." Noah's thumb brushed my arm. "I see you in navy," I said. "The deep kind. Like the ocean when it's holding secrets. And I see a dress for me, not white. Something simple. Something that moves. Something that feels like breath." He exhaled slowly, quietly. "And the light," I whispered. "God, the light. You know how it gets in October. Like the sun is apologizing for leaving. Everything golden. Everything honest." When I opened my eyes, Noah was looking at me like he was memorizing my face. "Then that's exactly what we're going to do," he said. I swallowed. "There's one more thing." He tilted his head. "What?" "I want it to be small. Intimate. No pressure. No obligations. No audience." He nodded immediately. "Just us and the people who already understand us." "And the ocean," I added. "And the ocean," he echoed. For a moment, everything was still. Then he smiled, slowly, completely, like the future had just stepped into the room. "Rowan," he said softly, "we're really doing this." The words settled over me like a promise. Yes, we were. But the universe wasn't finished with me yet. Because the next morning, as I stepped out of the shower and wrapped myself in a towel, my phone buzzed with a name I hadn't seen on my screen in weeks. Dad. My heart plummeted. He never called without a reason. And this silence-breaking moment? It wasn't going to be simple. Nothing in my family ever was. I should have known the peace wouldn't last. Stories like mine never pivot quietly, they crack open. It happened on a Tuesday. The kind of Tuesday that feels like background noise. Too bright, too ordinary, too easy to underestimate. I was in my studio, knee-deep in linen swatches and mood boards for a November wedding in Sedona, when my phone buzzed with a video call from June. June never video called me. Not unless it was an accident. Or an emergency. My stomach tightened. I wiped my hands on my jeans, stepped away from the table and answered. "Hey," I said, keeping my voice light. June's face filled the screen, pale, tight eyes wide and wet. She looked like she'd been holding her breath for an hour. "Ro," she said, and the sound of her voice cracked something inside me. "I need you to be honest with me." My heart began a slow, heavy thud. "Okay," I said carefully. "What's going on?" He swallowed hard. Are you getting married in California on October 9th? For a moment the whole room emptied. No sound. No color. Just that question hanging between us, vibrating like a plucked wire. I didn't move, afraid the truth would spill out too fast if I shifted even an inch. June, I said softly. No, she cut in. Please. Just answer the question. Her voice was trembling, not with anger, not yet. With fear. Which meant someone had told her something. Which meant our plan wasn't as airtight as I thought. I inhaled. Why do you think that? I asked, stalling. June blinked rapidly, tears gathering in the corners of her eyes. Because Molly's cousin works at the county clerk's office in Monterey, she said in a rush. And she saw your name on a marriage license request. She texted Molly, who told Mom, who wrote she's freaking out. She's calling it a betrayal. She thinks you're punishing us. Punishing. Of course that was the narrative. Of course I couldn't have made a decision for myself. It had to be about them. I closed my eyes. Are you, June whispered, really getting married that weekend? There was the fork in the road. The choice I knew would come but hoped would arrive later, when I was braver or more prepared or farther away. I opened my eyes. Yes, I said quietly. We are. June stared at me through the screen. Her jaw trembled. For a moment she said nothing. The same day as my wedding, she whispered. Her voice was small. A child's voice. A version of her I'd known years ago, before expectations hardened around her like plaster. I nodded once. Yes. She covered her mouth with her hand. Her shoulders shook. Why? She choked out. Why would you do that? To me. To you. I repeated, stunned at how quickly the narrative had twisted. That's what it looks like, she cried. Mom thinks you planned this to ruin everything. She thinks you're trying to steal attention. That you're trying to hurt us. And now she's calling Oliver's parents and everyone's panicking and, God, I don't know what to tell anyone. Tell them the truth, I said softly. Her eyes flashed. Which truth? That I'm not doing this to hurt you. I'm doing this because I'm tired of living small so other people can feel big. She didn't answer. I pressed on gently but firmly. You didn't want me at your wedding. June flinched. That wasn't my decision. Maybe not, I said. But you didn't fight it. She dropped her gaze, guilt flickering across her face like a passing shadow. You could have told me, she whispered. I'm your sister. Am I? I asked and instantly wished I could pull the words back. Not because they were cruel, because they were too true. June's breath shuddered out of her. I don't want us to be like this. Neither do I said. But your wedding. There's no place for me there. There hasn't been space for me in that house for years. Silence. Then barely audible. Are you inviting Mom and Dad? My throat tightened. No. Or me. My chest ached. June. Tears spilled over her cheeks. You really weren't going to tell me. I swallowed hard. I didn't know how. And I didn't want to give everyone a chance to tear it apart before it even existed. She wiped her face angrily. Mom is losing her mind. She's calling off vendors. She says she can't have a wedding on the same day as yours because everyone will think our family is divided. Our family is divided, I said softly. It has been for a long time. This isn't new, June. It's just visible now. She pressed her fingers to her temples. This is going to destroy everything. Or, I said quietly, maybe it will finally force us to stop pretending. Her head snapped up. Do you even hear yourself? This is the biggest day of my life. And it's the biggest day of mine, I said. For once, I'm choosing myself too. She stared at me, breathing hard. Then she whispered, Mom thinks you're playing us. I let out a humorless laugh. If I wanted to play you, I'd show up in a white jumpsuit with a megaphone. But her expression didn't change. No smile. No relief. Just hurt. Why October 9th? She asked again, softer this time. Out of every date in the world. I exhaled. The cliffs we want are only available that weekend. The light is perfect that time of year. It's meaningful to us. It wasn't the whole truth. But it was the truth I could give her. June swallowed. This isn't fair, she whispered. For who? I asked. Me, she said with a strangled laugh that sounded nothing like her. For our family. For you. For all of us. I know, I said gently. But living my life based on what's fair for everyone except me? That's what got us here in the first place. She looked away, shoulders curling in. And then she said something that nearly undid me. I'm scared Mom will never forgive you. I smiled sadly. Mom was looking for a reason not to forgive me long before this. Her breath caught. Please don't do this, she whispered. Please don't make everything fall apart. It was already falling apart, I said softly. I'm just no longer trying to hold it together alone. Her face crumpled again. She nodded. Fully. Brokenly. I have to go, she said. Mom's calling again. Before I could respond, she ended the call. The screen went dark. I stood there in my studio surrounded by color palettes, fabric swatches, and dreams I helped other people build. And for the first time I realized my own dream, my own life, was no longer something I was willing to cut down to fit inside someone else's frame. The phone buzzed again. This time from an unknown number. I didn't need to check to know who it was. I let it go to voicemail. Then another call. Then another. Mom again. Then a text from my aunt, then from my cousin, then from a family friend I hadn't heard from in years. My phone lit up like a crisis hotline. Everyone reaching out. Everyone demanding an explanation. Everyone acting like my wedding was an attack, a scandal, a catastrophic breach of protocol. I set the phone down, turned it face down, and walked out onto the balcony. Asheville stretched below me in warm sunset tones. The mountains glowed. The river shimmered. A hawk drifted lazily across the sky as if the world wasn't burning behind me. I inhaled deeply and whispered to the wind. I choose myself. For the first time in 28 years, the words felt true. The morning of October 9th began with a kind of quiet I'd never heard before. Not silence. Big Sur is never silent. But a stillness so complete it felt like the world had taken a deep breath and was holding it just for us. Fog curled low around the cliffs, soft and weightless, like the coastline was shrugging on a shawl. The ocean below was restless but muffled, its rhythm steady and ancient. The air tasted like salt and eucalyptus. And I was standing barefoot on the deck of our tiny cliffside cabin, wrapped in one of Noah's old flannels, staring at the Pacific like it was about to hand me the next chapter of my life. Behind me the sliding door opened. You're up early, Noah murmured, his voice still thick with sleep. I didn't look back. Couldn't help it. He stepped beside me, his body warm against the morning chill. Nervous? Not exactly, I said. Just aware. He nodded like he understood exactly what that meant. We stood like that for a while, listening to the waves crash against the rocks, the only constant sound in an unpredictable world. Today is the day, he finally said. I exhaled. Not shakily, but with the kind of release that comes from choosing something with your whole being. Today is the day. We didn't rush. That was part of the plan. No timeline, no pressure, no checklist of traditions to perform. The wedding wasn't until sunset and the day stretched wide and unhurried before us. We made breakfast slowly, moving around each other in our small cabin kitchen like a dance we'd practiced for years. Noah scrambled eggs. I cut fruit. He burned the toast. I pretended not to judge him for it. Normal. Simple. Steady. Felt like a blessing. Around 11, Serena texted. Call me when you're ready. The cliff looks dramatic as hell today. Good dramatic. I smiled. She'd flown out the night before, unapologetically intruding on our private elopement because, in her words, if you think I'm letting you get married without me, on MI coast, you've lost your mind. Second message followed. And FYI, I already fixed your hair in my mind. Prepare yourself. I laughed out loud. Noah raised an eyebrow. Serena. Who else? Should I start praying? Probably. We spent the early afternoon writing our vows, separately but side by side, legs intertwined on the cabin couch. Noah wrote slowly, pausing often, his brow furrowed like he was chiseling words out of stone. I wrote quickly, rewriting only when something didn't feel true. It wasn't emotional in the way I expected. It wasn't heavy. It was grounding. Almost peaceful. Around 3, Serena arrived with her arms full of supplies. Makeup bag, hot tools, a small jewelry box, and enough bobby pins to fortify a military base. Happy wedding day to my favorite chaotic queen, she declared as she barreled into the cabin, a whirlwind of floral perfume and confidence. She hugged me so tightly I squeaked. "Okay," she said, stepping back and placing her hands on her hips. "Let me see the canvas." "The canvas?" I echoed. "Yes," she said, circling me like a sculptor assessing marble. "Human art. Potentially feral bride. We're working with good bones." I snorted. "I swear if you call me feral one more time." "Sweetheart, that's a compliment in my vocabulary," she said. "Sit. I have magic to do." For the next hour, Serena fussed and styled and blended and pinned while Noah floated in and out of the room, occasionally stealing glances like he couldn't quite believe this was happening. At one point I caught him leaning in the doorway, arms crossed, watching us. "Everything okay?" I asked. His voice was quiet. "I'm just happy." It hit me so unexpectedly that tears gathered in my eyes. Serena clapped once. "Toe crying?" "Not yet. Save it for vows, you sentimental gremlins." We laughed through the tightness in our throats. When she finished, she turned me toward the small mirror above the dresser. For a moment I didn't speak. She kept everything simple. The makeup barely there and luminous, my hair in soft waves pulled back with a single gold pin shaped like a crescent moon. It looked like something wild and elegant at the same time. Something true. "Serena," I whispered, "I love it." She squeezed my shoulders. "I know." At 5:15, we walked down the narrow trail toward the cliffside clearing where Noah and I had chosen to do our ceremony. Fog was burning off in streaks, revealing the ocean in long, shimmering patches. The sky was turning into a gradient of molten gold and amber. The wind tugged at my hair and dress. Everything smelled like the sea. It was, there's no other word for it, cinematic. And waiting at the center of it all was Noah. He stood with his hands clasped in front of him, wearing a deep gray suit that made his eyes look impossibly bright. When he saw me, his expression cracked open, like he'd just witnessed a miracle he didn't know he'd been waiting for. My breath left my body entirely. Serena stepped back silently, letting me walk those last few steps alone. The world narrowed. Not in a suffocating way, more like a camera focusing on the only frame that mattered. When I reached him, Noah took my hands and whispered, "Hi." I smiled. "Hi. You look like the ocean made a wish," he said softly. I laughed, my voice catching. "And you look like you're about to ruin my mascara." He squeezed my hands. "Then we're even." There was no officiant, no script, no structure. Just the wind, the waves, and the two of us standing on the edge of the world. We exchanged vows as the sun dipped lower, each word carved out of years of navigating ourselves, our wounds, our dreams. Noah's voice broke once when he said, "You never asked me to save you, just to walk beside you. And I swear I always will." Mine trembled when I said, "You are the first place I've ever felt fully allowed to exist." We placed simple bands on each other's hands, thin gold arcs, warm from our pockets. Then he cupped my face and kissed me, fully, deeply, like a promise unfolding. The sun slipped behind the horizon just as our lips parted, leaving the sky in a blaze of orange and rose. The wind howled through the cliffs like applause. Serena sniffled loudly behind us. "I'm not crying," she choked. "It's just the sea air. And your vows. And everything." We laughed, our foreheads touching. This was the moment. The hinge on which my entire life swung open. My family, somewhere across the country, was probably sitting down for dinner in Charleston, smiling for photos under a live oak tree, completely unaware that on a cliff in California at almost the exact same moment, I was choosing myself, choosing love, choosing a story that didn't require shrinking. And as the last light faded, I realized something I'd never let myself fully believe before. This wasn't revenge. This wasn't defiance. This was freedom. Pure, untamed, breathtaking freedom. And it looked exactly like the Pacific at sunset. The morning of October 9th began the way all life-changing days begin. Quietly, almost suspiciously softly. No dramatic sunrise, no cinematic swell of music, no cosmic sign. Just pale California light slipping through the curtains of our rental cabin in Big Sur and the muted roar of distant waves. I woke before Noah. For a long moment I just lay there listening to the ocean, the steadiness of his breathing, the small creaks of the old wooden walls expanding in the cool morning air. My brain expected panic, nerves, guilt, something. But all I felt was alignment. Like every version of me, child, teenager, rebel, runaway, designer, lover, had finally lined up on the same axis. I slipped out of bed, pulled on a sweater, and stepped onto the deck overlooking the endless line where sky met sea. Fog hung low over the cliffs like a veil someone hadn't fully lifted yet, and the air tasted like eucalyptus and salt. I wrapped my arms around myself and breathed it in. This was the day. My wedding day. Not the one my parents curated, polished, and imposed. Not the one I was supposed to have. Not the one June was probably waking up to in Charleston right this second, surrounded by pastel bridesmaids and meticulously planned brunch schedules. A day built from my bones, not from expectation. Behind me, the cabin door creaked open. "You're up early," Noah's voice murmured, sleep thick and warm. I turned. His hair was a mess. He was barefoot, wearing the soft t-shirt he stole from me months ago. And the look he gave me, quiet, reverent, like he was seeing something sacred, almost unsteady me. "Couldn't sleep," I said. "Nervous?" "No," I admitted. "Just awake." He stepped close, slid his arms around my waist from behind and rested his chin on my shoulder. "You know," he murmured, "I spent half the night thinking about how to tell my sister we eloped without her so she doesn't murder me." I laughed. "Good luck. She likes me too much to blame me." "She likes you too much to let me off the hook," he corrected. We stood there for a while watching the fog drift. The silence wasn't heavy. It was grounding, like the earth was holding us up instead of gravity. Eventually Noah kissed the side of my neck. "We should eat." "Long day." "Long good day," I corrected. He smiled. By 10 o'clock, Serena arrived at the cabin, carrying 3 garment bags, a tackle box of makeup, and the kind of chaotic energy that only appears when a wedding professional is preparing for an event they actually care about personally. "Move," she announced, barging in like a small, furious storm. "Bride coming through." "I'm not even dressed," I protested. "Yes, because you're talking to me instead of getting into the shower," she snapped. "Hydrate. Moisturize. Breathe. Don't you dare swell before photos. I will personally depuff your entire soul." Noah took one look at her and fled with a backpack, mumbling something about picking up pastries from the cafe down the road. Serena marched me into the tiny bathroom and handed me a satin robe. "I still can't believe you said yes to this," she said, brushing my hair out with surprisingly gentle strokes. "I still can't believe you're bossing me around on my wedding day." "This is the job," she said. "You know this is the job." The robe was soft and cool. The steam from the shower fogged the mirror as she worked lotion into my shoulders like she was preparing a ritual offering. "You look calm," she said between strokes. "I am calm. Rowan, you're the least calm person I know." "I'm evolving." She snorted. "Or you're in denial." "Or," I countered, "I'm exactly where I'm meant to be." She paused long enough to meet my eyes in the mirror. "Yeah," she said. "You are." By 1 o'clock we were winding down Highway 1 toward the cove. The sky had burned off the fog completely, revealing a horizon so bright it almost didn't look real. Waves crashed against the cliffs with a rhythmic ferocity that made my whole chest vibrate. The ceremony site was simple, intentionally so. A half circle of driftwood logs. A scattering of eucalyptus leaves caught in the wind. The ocean the only backdrop. Minimalist, wild, honest. Marcus and 2 other photographer friends were already there with their gear spread across the rocks. David, the filmmaker, was standing on a boulder testing a drone, squinting at the screen with the concentration of an artist about to capture the backbone of a story. When they saw us, they waved. "Bride has entered the chat." Marcus called out, raising his camera like a toast. "Be nice," I shouted back. "No promises," he said. "You're too photogenic." Serena squeezed my arm. "Ready?" "Yeah." "Really ready?" "Yes." "Ready on a scale of 1 to..." "Serena," I groaned. He grinned. I got dressed in a grassy patch between 2 massive rocks where the wind tunneled dramatically enough to make my silk dress ripple like water. It wasn't a traditional gown. It wasn't even white. It was the color of bone and seafoam and moonlight blended together, soft and fluid, with a back that dipped low enough to reveal the inked constellations on my spine. "A masterpiece," Serena whispered as she zipped me up. "It's just a dress." "Rowan." "Shut up. You look feral and regal at the same time." like a queen who would start a revolution barefoot. I blushed. Me. Someone who hadn't blushed since high school. Across the rocks, Noah was buttoning his shirt. Navy linen. Rolled sleeves. Slightly undone in the most intentional way. He wasn't looking at me yet. The plan was no first look. He'd see me when I walked toward him. At 4:58 p.m., 2 minutes before sunset, I stood at the edge of the cliff path, the sea wind whipping the hem of my dress around my legs. Down below, our tiny circle of people waited. Just a handful. Serena, Marcus, David. 2 of Noah's closest friends from college. And the ocean. Always the ocean. Noah stood in the center of them, his back to me. When the light dipped into full golden hour, Serena squeezed my hand and whispered, "Go." I walked. Barefoot. Heart loud. Hair wild. Dress alive in the wind. The world sharpened, the crash of the surf, the grit under my feet, the electric hum in my veins. Halfway down, Noah turned. He didn't move. Didn't speak. Just looked at me. I'd seen him look at me 1,000 times before, but never like this. His eyes were soft and full and stunned, like he was seeing the beginning of something he'd been waiting his whole life to recognize. The air thickened between us. Time bent. The cliff felt like an altar. When I reached him, he exhaled. "You're unreal," he whispered. "So are you," I said. David stepped into place. "Ready?" We nodded. The ceremony lasted 10 minutes. 10 minutes of promises whispered through wind. Of vows spoken with a kind of trembling certainty I didn't know I could feel. Of tears I didn't hide. Of laughter that cracked straight through something old and brittle inside me. When Noah said, "I choose you not despite everything but because of everything," my legs almost gave out. When I said, "I'm done shrinking to fit inside other people's stories. This is mine now. Ours," he closed his eyes like the words hit somewhere deep. And when we kissed, when the sun hit the horizon exactly at that moment, every camera clicked in unison. The sky exploded in gold. The waves roared louder. My heart felt like it had its own gravitational pull. We weren't just getting married. We were breaking a cycle. We were rewriting a lineage. We were stepping out of every shadow our families had cast and into a light we built ourselves. When we pulled apart, breathless, glowing, trembling, Serena shouted, "Holy, okay, that's it, that's the shot of the century." Marcus laughed. "Good luck topping that, big sir." David lowered his camera slowly. "You too," he said, awe tugging at his voice. "Just broke the internet." I didn't understand what he meant. Not yet. But I would. Why would? Because while we stood there on that cliff, wrapped in sunlight and salt and something like destiny, our story was already spreading. Far beyond that coastline. Far beyond that moment. Far beyond anything I ever expected. The world had just witnessed our beginning. And it was only getting started. By the time Noah and I landed back in Asheville after our whirlwind wedding in Big Sur, I thought the storm might be calming. I thought the world would let us breathe for a moment. I thought the ceremony, the cliffs, the ocean wind tangling my hair, the low burn of sunset turning our vows into something holy, would be the emotional peak. But Big Sur had only been the spark. What came after was the wildfire. It started the next morning while we were still half asleep and tangled in hotel sheets, the Pacific still echoing in our bones. My phone buzzed. Once. Twice. Then non-stop. Vibrations stacking until the mattress hummed beneath us like a trapped beehive. I groaned and reached for it. The lock screen lit up with a notification overload. 1,287 new likes. 64 new followers. Your video has 100K views. You've been tagged in 14 posts. I blinked hard, thinking it was some sort of glitch. "Noah," I whispered. "What is happening?" He rubbed his eyes, reached for his own phone, and froze. "Oh, wow," he said softly. "Ro, you need to see this." He held out his screen. It was David, the videographer friend we'd invited, posting a short 30-second clip from our ceremony. Just a teaser. Just a taste. Just enough. The clip was simple. Me and Noah standing under the arch Serena built from driftwood and eucalyptus, wind pulling at my dress, the sea beating itself against the cliffs behind us. Noah brushing a strand of hair behind my ear. Me laughing through tears during my vows. The way we leaned into each other like gravity itself had softened. David captioned it, "When love meets the right light." Rowan and Noah Big Sur. October 9th. Nothing dramatic. Nothing provocative. But something about it, its honesty, its wild simplicity had apparently detonated across the internet. I opened Instagram. The clip had 94,000 likes. It had been posted 3 hours ago. My heart kicked hard against my ribs. Okay, I whispered. Well, that's unexpected. Noah said, eyes widening as another notification popped up. It's not just IG. He tapped into YouTube. David's full highlight video, the one he'd planned to send us privately, was live. And it had 2.8 million views. My stomach dropped. He uploaded the whole thing? He must have scheduled it, Noah said. Probably meant to tell us. You know how David is, creative chaos. I clicked the video. It opened on the wide shot of Big Sur, golden cliffs, endless horizon, before gently cutting to me stepping into frame, barefoot in the dirt, my dress catching the wind like it was breathing. The comments section was exploding. This is the most beautiful wedding I've ever seen. Who are these people? Where is this location? I cried and I don't even know them. This is what love looks like when you stop performing for everyone else. Does anyone know the designer of her dress? I'm canceling my ballroom wedding. Someone show this to my fiancé. I scrolled faster. My pulse thudded in my ears. A blue check mark. Then another. Then, oh God. A repost from an account with 5 million followers. At Modern Love Stories. If you ever needed proof that intimate weddings, traditional weddings, this is it. Noah let out a breath. This is big. Too big, I said. But I didn't stop scrolling. I couldn't. TikTok was next. Someone had ripped the clip and set it to an acoustic cover of Bloom. It already had 300,000 likes. A creator with a huge following had stitched it, crying into the camera while saying, I want a love like this. I stared at Noah. No way this is real, I whispered. He took my phone gently, set it aside and looked at me with soft, steady eyes. This is happening. A knock sounded on our hotel door. We both jumped. It was Serena, hair a mess, holding her phone like it was a bomb. Okay, she said breathlessly. First of all, congratulations on being married. Second, holy he. She barged into the room and held her screen up. Rowan, she said, voice quivering with adrenaline, the California Tourism Board just reposted your wedding photos. On their official page. What? En Vogue Weddings tagged you in their story. And a company in LA just DM'd us asking if you design an elopement event for them next spring. She gulped air. And there's a rumor going around that a producer from Good Morning America wants to reach out. I sat down slowly on the edge of the bed. The world seemed to tilt sideways. I didn't mean for this, I whispered. I know, Serena said, kneeling beside me. But Rowan, this is what happens when art and authenticity collide. People feel it. Authenticity. The very thing my family had spent my whole life trying to sand down to something smooth and silent. Now it was the reason 6 million strangers knew my name. I didn't even have time to process that before my phone buzzed again. This time it was a text. From June. My breath caught. Her name on my screen felt like ice water down my spine. I opened it. Rowan, Mom is freaking out. He saw the video. She says reporters are reaching out. What is going on? Please call me. Noah placed a hand on my knee. Do you want me to answer for you? He asked gently. No, I said, already standing. This is my story. I'll handle it. But as I took a breath and prepared to hit call, Serena grabbed my wrist, not to stop me but to steady me. Before you talk to her, she said, her voice tender now, you need to remember something. I looked at her, searching her face. You didn't do anything wrong, she said. You lived. You loved. And the world happened to see it. That's not a crime. I swallowed hard. Nodded. Pressed call. The phone rang. Once. Twice. 3 times. Then June answered. Her voice came through the speaker in a strained whisper. Rowan, what have you done? I closed my eyes. Not in shame. Not in guilt. But in realization. Big Sur wasn't just a wedding. It was a fault line. And everything was starting to shift. The first 48 hours after the video exploded were a blur of disbelief, adrenaline and pure, echoing unreality. By the time Noah and I got back to our rental cabin overlooking Pfeiffer Beach, the ceremony video had passed 12 million views. By morning it hit 25. By noon 50. By the end of the week, 100 million. 100 million strangers had watched us get married. 100 million people had witnessed the moment I stepped out of my family's shadow and into my own life. And my family, for the first time in my memory, had no control over the narrative. At first I expected the panic, the backlash, the storm. What I didn't expect was silence. Not quiet. Not distance. Silence. A complete, resounding absence. No calls. No texts. Not even a passive-aggressive Facebook message from my mother disguised as concern. Nothing. It was like my family had collectively decided, if we ignore her long enough, maybe the world will too. But the world did the opposite. On day 3, I woke up to an email from a major bridal magazine asking for an interview. 2 hours later, a lifestyle writer from The Atlantic wanted to talk about the cultural rejection of performative weddings. That same afternoon, a producer from a morning show reached out about a segment titled, "Why One Bride Said I Don't to Family Expectations," and the internet cheered. Every request called me a bride. Every headline called me brave. Not difficult. Not dramatic. Not a disappointment. Brave. The word felt foreign and familiar at the same time, like something I'd been all along but hadn't had permission to claim. Noah handled the attention with the same calm he brought to everything. He made coffee, answered emails, gently declined offers that felt invasive, and kept telling me, "Breathe, Ro. You deserve this. All of it." I believed him. Or at least I was learning how. But I knew sooner or later the silence from Ohio would crack. It finally did on day 5. The notification popped onto my screen while I was sitting on our porch watching the fog pull back from the cliffs. A voicemail from my father. Not my mother. My father. I stared at the screen for a long moment before pressing play. "Hi, Rowan." "Dad." Pause. A swallow. He sounded older than the last time we spoke. "We saw the video. Your mother and I, we didn't realize. Well, it's everywhere. People at church asked us if we'd traveled to California for your wedding, and we didn't know what to say." Another pause. Longer this time. "Your mother is very upset. She feels blindsided. And embarrassed. And she needs time. We both do." I closed my eyes. There was. Not congratulations. Not "we're happy for you." Not "your wedding was beautiful." Not even "we love you." Just "we're embarrassed." The story of my life, condensed into one voicemail. Noah came outside carrying 2 mugs of coffee. He saw my face and sat beside me, waiting without pushing. I handed him my phone. He listened. His jaw tightened. "Rowan," he said quietly, "I swear if I ever meet them in a dark alley." I laughed despite everything. "Easy, Tiger." He softened. "How do you feel?" I stared out at the waves crashing against the rocks below. The water was wild today, honest in a way my family had never been. I searched for the word. Free. Noah exhaled long and slow, like he'd been bracing for the opposite. That afternoon my sister finally reached out. A text. Just 2 words. "Can we talk?" I didn't ignore her. I didn't know my parents anything but June. She had lived under the same roof. Breathed the same curated air. Learned the same rules about shrinking. So I called her. She answered on the first ring. Her voice was soft. Pagan. Not angry, something worse. Something like grief. "Rowan." "Hey," I said carefully. She exhaled shakily. I watched the video. I braced myself. For anger. For accusation. For the emotional shrapnel she always seemed to carry on behalf of our parents. But instead she whispered. "It was beautiful." My breath caught. "I mean it," she said. Was it real? And gentle. And everything a wedding should be. Another inhale. "You looked so happy." I swallowed. I know. Pause. "And I'm glad." The wind rattled the porch railing. I waited. Then she said the thing I wasn't prepared for. "I wish I'd had the courage to do what you did." Silence fell between us. Heavy. Sacred. "June," I whispered, "your wedding was beautiful too." She let out a faint, humorless laugh. Parts of it. Other parts were exactly what everyone else wanted. I thought of the caption on her Instagram photo. "Surrounded by the people who matter most." I thought of the meaning behind it. Or the meaning I'd assumed was behind it. Maybe I'd been wrong. June, I said gently, were you happy at your wedding? A long aching silence. Then, I don't know, she admitted. I wanted to be. But I kept thinking about you. And how you should have been there. And how it didn't feel complete without you. And how, maybe none of this is what either of us really wanted. A lump formed in my throat. We can fix it, I said softly. Not the wedding. But us. Her voice broke. Can we? Yes, I said. If you want talk. Really talk. Without Mom directing the conversation. She inhaled sharply. I do. We stayed on the phone for almost an hour. We laughed about childhood memories. We admitted things we'd never dared say aloud, like the fact that she'd always envied my courage and I'd always envied her acceptance. We apologized. We forgave things we didn't realize we'd been carrying. It wasn't a magical repair. It wasn't perfect. But it was a beginning. When I hung up, Noah was leaning in the doorway, arms crossed, a small smile tugging at his mouth. How'd it go? I leaned into him. Better than I expected. His smile widened. Good. But my parents, I exhaled. I don't think they'll reach out again. Then they don't deserve the version of you they're finally seeing, he said. The world does. And so does your sister. And I definitely do. I rested my forehead against his. You're very confident for someone who married a woman who makes things uncomfortable. He grinned. I'm counting on that part. We stayed like that for a while, the sunset washing the cliffs below in molten color. My phone buzzed once. A simple notification. Your wedding video. 122M views. Trending #1 worldwide. I expected to feel overwhelmed. Instead I felt grounded. Steady. Certain. Because for all the noise and numbers and headlines, this wasn't a story about virality. It was a story about choosing myself. Choosing love. Choosing honesty. Choosing a life that fit even if my family didn't. The world was calling it brave. But standing there in Noah's arms, with the Pacific roaring beneath us and our future stretched wide open, one thing felt unmistakably true. It wasn't bravery. It was freedom. I used to think closure was something you got from other people. An apology. A confession. A moment where everything finally made sense. But the truth is, closure is something you build, quietly brick by brick. Until one day you look up and realize you've constructed an entire life without the people who once made you feel small inside it. The Netflix documentary premiered on a Thursday evening. Noah and I watched it in our new apartment in Santa Fe, a place we chose because it felt wide open, unclaimed by any past version of ourselves. The windows faced the mountains, the light turned the walls gold at sunset, and the air smelled like sagebrush and possibility. We sat on the couch, legs tangled, a bowl of popcorn between us even though neither of us ate more than a handful. My heart thudded with that strange electric weight of being seen, really seen, not through someone else's distorted lens, but through my own story finally being allowed to exist without apology. The documentary was beautiful. Painfully, honestly beautiful. It showed Big Sur the way it had truly been, uncontained. The ocean roaring below us. My silk dress whipping in the wind. Noah's hands shaking during his vows. My laugh catching in my throat when Yeppy, interviewed from Sicily, said that some love stories arrive like earthquakes, rearranging the landscape for the better. They interviewed couples who'd watched our wedding video and changed their own plans. They filmed me designing 2 new elopements inspired by our ceremony. They talked to Noah about how authenticity has become a form of rebellion in a world obsessed with appearances. And then they showed something that made my breath catch. Me standing at the edge of the cliff, the sun behind me, tears drying on my cheeks as the wind blew through my hair, smiling like I finally belonged to myself. Not to a narrative. Not to a family expectation. Not to a role someone else wrote for me. To myself. When the credits rolled, Noah squeezed my hand. You okay? He asked. I nodded slowly. Yeah, I think I am. My phone buzzed. Of course it did. I knew it would. Not because my family had watched the documentary, but because the entire country had. There were messages from journalists, from brides, from wedding designers wanting to collaborate, from young women who said they finally had the courage to come out to their families, from people who had never even heard of Big Sur before but now couldn't stop dreaming about cliffs at sunset. And one message from a number I knew by heart. June. It wasn't long. Just a single line. I watched it. That was it. No accusation. No guilt. No apology. No invitation back into the version of my family where I had to shrink myself to fit. Just, I watched it. And I knew what she meant. She saw me. Maybe for the first time. Not as the older sister who overshone her. Not as the family's inconvenient variable. Not as the one who made everything awkward. But as a person. A whole one. A moment later, another message came through. The wedding was beautiful. You were beautiful. I'm glad you got your moment. I'm sorry we weren't part of it. I read it 3 times. Not because I needed to, but because the younger version of me, the one who spent years begging for scraps of emotional clarity, finally exhaled. I typed a reply. Thank you. I'm glad you got your moment too. I didn't add more. She didn't either. It was enough. Not reconciliation. Not a return to the old pattern. Just 2 adults acknowledging that sometimes love looks like distance, and honesty looks like letting someone grow away from you. The next morning I woke before dawn. It was instinct at this point, my body trained by years of sunrise shoots. I slipped out of bed quietly so I wouldn't wake Noah. He murmured something in his sleep and rolled toward the warm space I left behind. I stepped outside onto our small balcony. The air was cold and clean. The horizon was just beginning to glow. Sunrise in Santa Fe wasn't Big Sur. It wasn't cliffs and salt water and wind that tried to pull the veil off your head. It wasn't the place where Noah and I promised each other a life. But it was ours now. This moment. This sky. This silence. This peace. I wrapped my arms around myself and closed my eyes as the edges of the sun began to break open. Somewhere far away my family was waking up too. Drinking coffee. Getting ready for work. Maybe arguing about something small and familiar. Maybe sitting in silence with their own thoughts about the documentary. Maybe not thinking of me at all. And for the first time that didn't hurt. For the first time it felt correct. Balanced. True to the shape our lives had grown into. Inside I heard Noah shift, then the soft sound of his footsteps. A moment later his arms slid around my waist from behind, warm and sure. You're up early, he murmured. I wanted to see the sun, I said. He rested his chin on my shoulder, looking out with me as the sky opened into color. Rose, lavender, molten gold. Looks like a good day, he whispered. It is, I said. And I meant it, not the way people say it automatically, but in the way that comes from knowing you survived something, transformed something, chose something and came out the other side not perfect, not healed but whole. I leaned back into him, letting the warmth of his body merge with the warmth of the rising sun. Do you ever regret it? He asked quietly. Any of it? I thought about that for a long moment. The hurt. The rejection. The phone calls. The accusations. The silence. The fear of losing my family. The fear of losing myself. The cliff. The vows. The wind. The golden light. The way the world cracked open afterward and never quite closed. No, I said finally. If anything, I wish I'd chosen myself sooner. He kissed the side of my head and said, then let's keep choosing that. For the rest of our lives. The sun lifted fully over the mountains, washing us in light. I closed my eyes and breathed deeply. Sage, cedar, morning air and freedom. For the first time in my life I didn't feel like I was standing outside of a story I was supposed to belong to. For the first time I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be. Writing my own.